And welcome back to the Tabletop RPG Discussions. This week, we're talking about homebrew, and we have Kane returning.
Hello.
And this time we have Juice.
Hello.
So, we'll get into Tabletop RPG homebrew, I guess, pretty quickly. It's pretty much just making up your own rules for new stuff.
Yeah. That is kind of the definition of homebrew.
Yep, pretty much. Just making up your own kind of rules. And so long as your DM, narrator, GM allows it, it's pretty much okay. Some people have issue with it, like it could ruin the balance of the game. Others may think that it's just too wacky or too zany or too overpowered, too weird, all sorts of different complaints. But to some degree, it also is a really great outlet for people to create new possibilities in the world that allows them to, build whatever they really want. I guess certain forms of homebrew that we've seen, obviously, with a system that is completely new, like with Animite Tales, it's a whole new system of its own. So I can't really talk about any kind of homebrew that I've personally done, but we do have a lot of homebrew potentials with the unique attribute system, where you can practically just add your own unique twists onto powers, even potentially changing them entirely. And you've also got the anthropial system, which is basically a system that allows you to be a new type of race. One particular one that comes to mind for you specifically, Juice, is the Bonethropial Bartholomew Bones.
Yeah. Which is very fun to play. And I know that the other players miss them.
All the time.
All the time.
It's funny because when you first came to me with that idea for the villain campaign, you were like, "Can I play as a skeleton?"
Yeah. Just the idea of playing the wacky, Skeletor-esque character. It's fun, It's a fun role to play.
Absolutely. Especially considering it was also kind of filling in for the whole bard concept as well.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is, obviously, the bardic abilities had nothing to do with Bartholomew's powers. That was just, things that you could pick up that we made along the way as we went.
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, do you remember what powers he actually had?
He was a healer, right? Self-regeneration, his actual powers.
Yeah.
In terms of musical powers, he had things from giving people advantage to giving people disadvantage, straight up damage, making people fall asleep, and stringing those together as we leveled them up, really, from what I've learned right after the campaign ended, made him very powerful.
Oh, absolutely.
And again, this is that with the cloning power, which I only used final session once, because I had no idea he could do that for most of the time, the entire campaign. Pairing those two up can make a really overpowered attack, and a part of me is sad I didn't get to use it because I didn't come up with it until it was over. But also, it's probably good that I didn't.
I quite liked the stuff that you came up with for Bartholomew. His power, obviously, as you said, it came from healing factor, healing powers. And as you said, it's self-healing. He had the ability to self biomass manipulation, which allows the user to be able to legitimately choose what part of their bodies can grow in certain ways and shape their own physiology and stuff. But for Bartholomew's, there was also a unique attribute attached to that, which was it could only affect bones. Because normally you can regenerate flesh and organs and all that sort of stuff. Bartholomew is just living bone. So his power only helped for bone growth. So I think at one point we had a joke where it was like, oh, if someone copied his powers, all that could happen is that they could heal their own bones, and that's it. It would do nothing if not like be really good for bone growth, but it wouldn't heal like flesh wounds or organ damage or anything like that. So it's a power that is unique specifically to Bartholomew as well, because even if you took that power away from him, it still would be useless to anyone else who wasn't a bone thropial. The first of the race as a whole, because we were like, I've never thought of creating a skeleton, living, walking, talking skeleton character before. So that.
I was just gonna say, technically, all characters are walking, talking skeletons.
Boo! Boo!
I mean, he's not wrong.
No, he's not wrong, but he's technically correct, which is the worst and best kind of correct. The fact is that like this spanned from the concept of it's homebrew to the point of which that like most of the players, including myself as a DM, loved it so much that I eventually just went, screw it, this is now going to be a playable race. So it was something that was at first creation, it was homebrew, and now it's an actual thing that people will be able to play. That's how good a homebrew is. I absolutely love that. But Kane, you've played quite a few different characters with a few different homebrew abilities and so on.
I mean, I've also had homebrew environments for my characters. Like my third character, I think it's third, Anarcho, who technically had an entire separate universe linked to him, which is completely out of the main universe.
Yes, that's true. Like a whole homebrew backstory that was actually technical.
Yeah, a whole universe that technically also had magic in it, which is something that isn't in the game. So, yeah, he had that going. I'm trying to think of other characters that have had homebrew abilities though.
I know that you had that one character that is like Lee or Lee Kane or something like that. That sort of like Bruce Lee version of a character.
Oh yeah, I think it was Levi. The Eyes of the Moon.
That's it. Where it's like a telepathy and
ocular user.
That's it. It was sort of like a play on the sort of Sharingan sort of style abilities, where like all your powers came directly from your eyes and had special effects. Like you could only cast illusions through the eyes rather than being able to be like a telepath in the usual way.
Yeah, my powers are directly linked. Although I think mechanic-wise as well, I could do any 10+ ability like to someone if I got direct eye contact. But the other interesting thing was the fact that there was that sacrificial power system.
Yes.
Where I could essentially sacrifice, I think it was like 1/10 or something, like 1/10 or something of my range, like permanently to auto succeed on an ability check, or like a power save or something like that. But obviously, if I did it too much, it would go to the point where my character would literally go blind, which would just essentially render both their powers useless.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah, that was an interesting one. Although I didn't really get to play it that much, because that campaign ended incredibly soon.
Another character that you also didn't get to play as for a very long time was a character that you named Crollo, who had the ability of copying and amalgamation.
Yeah, and copying was just anything. Whatever he copies, it becomes the opposite.
Yeah, if it had an opposite, or if there could be a way to be opposite. The weird thing with that one, though, is that like because of the ability was so wide, it was just left so open that you could touch someone who had any kind of power, and then I'd either have to make it up or it'd have to be so obvious that it could be nothing else.
That was kind of awkward because I remember it literally took us, I think, at a certain point, it took us like a while to actually figure out what this power's opposite would be.
I mean, there were two that were very obvious, and there was like one or two that was just like terrible. Like you had at one point technopathy, and I was like, it's biopathy. You can now control people's bodies with their mind and read their bodies in your head or something. It was like really awkward, but it kind of worked for if you wanted to puppeteer someone.
Yeah.
What was it? There was
that, and then there was also liquid energy mimicry.
From Black Fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I just gave to someone else. And then there was absorption regeneration, which just meant I could basically kill myself to heal someone else.
Yes, so instead of you absorbing things, you would then actually just give it over instead. That was unique.
I feel like there are others, but I don't remember.
I think that there could have been, but I cannot remember off the top of my head. But those were the big ones that sort of carried out. One of the things that I really liked about these kind of homebrews, is that you can completely rewrite the way that a power works, so you can slightly alter it, and then therefore the entirety of the context of the power has changed forever. I mean, just having the idea of for instance, Bartholomew Bones, a character that is just a literal skeleton that is alive. There's no flesh, no no blood, no nothing, just bones.
Kind
and then
bare bones, yeah.
Yeah. Damn it. On top of this, though, he also had an ability that only with him, only could, be perfect. Whereas if someone else got their hands on it, as I said, if they were able to steal his power upon his death, if they're able to kill him, or if they were to copy it, it would be practically useless to anyone else who wasn't just purely a bare bones walking, talking skeleton. If they had, or if they required to sustain themselves through the means of their flesh and blood and organs, that power would be practically useless, or at the very least, so damn bad that it just would not be very useful. Because all it would be able to do is heal your bones, which to some degree is very useful, but obviously when you think about the way that other healing powers work, that's actually amazingly good. If you were able to heal your own flesh and blood and bones, whereas if you suddenly woke up and it was the reverse Wolverine, where you now have to only heal your bones, you can't heal any part of your flesh. It's now so much worse than actually gaining a healing factor, because if you want to try and weaponize them, you have the bones burst out of your hands or your wrists or wherever, and now you're just bleeding. Because of the bones have burst through the blood vessels, which aren't healing. So it's just a perfect power for Bartholomew, but it was a terrible power for anyone else, and that's why it's so unique. You can copy it, but why would you? Why would you do that?
I think during the fight, we did fight someone who could do that. I know he didn't do it with Bartholomew, and I think we threw a building on top of him, didn't we?
Yes.
Yeah. Good times, good times. I think Bartholomew was stuck in a void.
He was stuck in a void, yeah. Not Sam's character Vale was not the greatest character, which again I'll get into at some point in another episode with Sam and Alex, who also had a unique attribute. But the interesting thing to me, and probably the thing that just amazed me the most about it, was that Bartholomew also ended up just being one of the wackier, zanier characters, because that he could shape his body into vehicles made of bones. And as long as he was attached or somewhere in this structure, he could basically be the living motor for it as well, which is just so funky.
Yeah. Who needs horsepower when you got bone power?
Damn it. But another one that I really do like is Kane, you've also recently been playing a character who's like a pyrokinetic, whose backstory is that like they have, that basically they have like the essence of this weird elemental spirit passed down through their bloodline or something.
Yeah, although that is a very like that's why how it sounds. It's a pretty soft one because I think all it does at the minute is pretty much crossbreed my damage with something else. Although I do know in that campaign I also have the limitations of theoretically anything that affects a spirit can also affect me.
Yes,
so,
yeah.
Theoretically, if someone was able to trap a spirit inside a box, they could technically do that to my character, despite not being technically a full spirit.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah, but that one's pretty light because all that is again, it's essentially just a crossbreed damage between all my fire stuff. Essentially, does fire and psychic damage.
Yeah. Which still ends up being quite useful against characters that are immune to fire but aren't immune to psychic.
Yeah, although it's really cheesy now because it technically also, I think I need to ask this of Bill, but I think that also technically goes over to my cryo damage because I took temperature control. So now I've just got fire, ice, and psychic damage at my disposal,
which is mental.
But, yeah,
it's cool though because it's kind of like almost like whenever you add psychic damage to also almost any of the different types of damage that you can do, it's sort of similar to as like spirit damage. It sort of feels almost magical.
Yeah, although there is, I've been talking to you about this, Joe, for a while. There is the one homebrewed power I want to do that I haven't been able to play yet because it's for a campaign down the later road, which is the Nimbus manipulation one.
Yes, yeah. Do you want to explain how that works?
So essentially, it's the combination of a hydrokinesis and electrokinesis. And essentially, what it allows me to do is instead of control water, I convert that water essentially into, I think it's a cloud mist. I can either turn it into a cloud or like a mist-like substance, essentially.
Yeah.
However, the limitation is one, I can't control water. I have to turn it into a cloud first, essentially, to be able to use and manipulate the cloud. And secondly, my lightning can't come from my character. It has to come from the cloud I make. Unless I think tactile. That one's still kind of in the air.
You can generate lightning, but it's only tactile, so it's like you're a living taser, but you can't make it come off.
I can't use my second power unless I use the first power to make that thing. But because of that, I've essentially made almost a new power that has fun bits of manipulation. Like, I think we were saying the only other power that you could kind of do that with, well, you could do it with, but take you a while, is chemistry. Because obviously, you could kind of manipulate clouds when you get to the later stages, but you wouldn't really, unless you were a Gemini, you wouldn't be able to make clouds and be able to do that. So
yeah.
It's essentially just a centralized power that's allowed me to mix the two up for a bit. But obviously, thanks to the level 10s and stuff, the power gets really wacky in the game. Because you can, thanks to, what was it like? Is it like, I've forgotten what the evolution is on the hydrokinesis, but the one that essentially allows you to control, is it liquid control?
Is that where you can liquid control is where you can control any kind of substance that is a liquid, and then you've then got water temperature manipulation.
Yes, because there's one that would essentially allow me to do like boiling water from the skull and hail on someone and things like that. The other one is kind of scary because you could technically just turn someone's blood into a cloud inside their body.
Just make them burst, like it just explode. Yeah.
So that one's pretty scary. And then the other one with obviously electrokinesis, you get electromagnetism, which just allows you to have magnetism at your control, which is pretty scary. So that's the power that I really want to test out. But I'm waiting for a certain campaign to be able to use that power. So I've got to wait quite a while.
Yeah. Also, Juice, you've just reminded me. Technically, theoretically, in the campaign after the tournament, if you get a chance to replay, or at the very least, if you don't get to play, but you actually can visit in both the tourney and in the revealing campaign, there's a certain Bartholomew Bones who has now made his own homebrew environment as well.
Quite literally made it. Yeah.
An entire.
It is very. It's very funny to me that that's what I decided to do with Bartholomew.
So after the villain campaign, they all took some time off, and they went off in different directions at certain points. Bartholomew eventually decided, I'm going to make an entire island from bones. Since he can keep generating bone matter, like, practically infinitely, he does so over the span of, like, a couple of years, or at least, like, 2 decades. And now there's an entire island, and he's also been able to create a new species of bone thropials by implanting his bone matter into, at the time, living subjects. And then when they die, new bone thropials are born. The craziest part about this is that, like, some of them do worship him as a god, and others just, call him or understand him to be the original creator of their race. So yeah, like, literally he's pretty much in most senses either a big granddaddy, Bones, or a god of a whole new race.
Yeah.
An entire bone island.
They said my body was a temple. I didn't think they meant it literally.
When Bartholomew sits around the house, he literally sits around the house.
We could also talk about this isn't related to Bartholomew, but the next campaign, if I don't play Bartholomew, we'll probably be going with a sort of wild magic homebrew.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that build a bit?
Obviously we haven't fully fleshed it out, so there's not a lot to talk about, but just the idea of being able to not fully control what damage type or what power you're using, but having access to almost all of them all at once is a very fun idea to me, as I am quite the gambler.
Yes, you are, absolutely. I mean, I've been on Cookie's server quite the time now, and I see that you do love rolling random generated dice, so I do get that.
Don't look in the bot commands chat in that server.
For one particular thing, I really love the idea of that. Kane, for if you don't really know too much about what we're talking about, for the revealing, we were talking about Juice having a catalyst character. But they have.
Yeah, no, I do remember this. I think you brought it up to me ages ago.
Did I?
On one of your long rants.
They are long, and those do happen very often.
Yeah, it was ages ago, but I do remember roughly because the minute you mentioned Catalyst, they clicked.
Pretty much unique attribute. Whenever activating any of the different bits of bling, kind of like the best way to explain it for those of you who are probably listening and thinking only in D&D terms, kind of like an artificer / sorcerer, where they have a load of different objects and items that are infused with power, and they can activate it. They can choose one to activate. However, if they get a specific roll that is too high, what actually happens is it goes wild, and then a new dice is rolled. That dice then determines if the ability happens as a misfire, so it like accidentally does the exact opposite that you wanted, or it activates another one of the items randomly, and it can either be good or bad. So it can either activate the same item but bad, same item but good. It can activate another item but bad, or another item but good. So for instance, you might say, I'm going to just cast like a healing on you, so I heal you from a distance, and then suddenly like, oh no, I've also now cast a fireball. But you might be able to choose where it goes if it's the good version of fireball. But if it's the bad version, you accidentally cast it at the exact same person that you're trying to heal. In other circumstances, if it's an ability that you don't see to have a bad way that it can be activated, like say for instance just the sheer activation of flight, instead it could be, well, the bad version of the activation of flight is you activate flight in the stead of healing someone. So again, it's just like that concept of wild magic of something's happening and you don't quite know if it's going to be good or bad.
Yeah.
I personally love that idea because obviously, forever the gambler. Yeah.
Yeah. As you might have seen the amount I've rolled as I posted that in the.
Yes, is it like 600 times or something?
Well, no, it's 17,549 results for the amount I've rolled.
Jeez, just you have a problem, G.
I do. I do have a problem.
I also realised this is actually
It's only a problem if it's ruining your life, so you know.
It's only a problem if I stop.
Kane, you weren't there for the Lord Dusk situation, which, for some context, Lord Dusk is the creator of the bot I was using to roll. This bot's in over 2,000 servers. I apparently was equivalent to like half the rolls being used in like the past 3 months.
No, that doesn't sound like a problem. It sounds
it's
like
only a problem. It's only a problem if it's...
They legitimately lost sleep because of me, and they also put a queue in the bot because of me.
But that's ruining other people's lives, not yours. So it's all fine.
As once a wise but very terrifying little android once said, "It's only a problem if I stop." And to add an extra bit of paraphrase to that, it's only a problem if I stop. ... or no one is supervising me.
Yeah.
Oh dear. You have no impulse control, and it's great.
I really don't. It's also like anytime I enter the kitchen, I leave with like a cup of tea, and that's straight out of habit.
What happens when there is no tea?
Just hot water, just out of habit.
It's a dark day in hell when I run out of tea.
Oh no.
Okay, we're here to kick ass and drink tea. Thankfully, I'm not out of tea just yet.
Yeah. It's like tea doesn't... I built up a caffeine immunity at this point. So like it doesn't even do anything for me.
Juice is true homebrew. That's another thing though, because like homebrew, especially with the situation for the unique attribute system, homebrew and unique attributes also can change not only the context of the powers, but they can also add additional buffs to powers as well. For instance, obviously we know the obvious one for the current crew in the tourney, Adrian, who has the Spiteful Stinger unique attribute, which makes them more susceptible to electricity attacks, but they are now super resistant to fire attacks. And that makes them rather uniquely, different than most. I was also going to say, like, another homebrew that actually was quite interesting that I think I've seen in the parties before that is actually quite fascinating is the Black Flame. We've talked about him a couple of times. A guy that we used to play games with, who's also on the podcast a lot, Alfie. He played as a character called Adrian Bright, aka the Black Flame, and he had fire mimicry, but instead he swapped fire damage for darkness damage, and that was literally all it was. But it was so terrifying and so badass at the same time. It was really ominous and really cool for it to work in that particular way. Because it then made the character had an immunity to a really good, really terrifying damage type, but it was so rare that basically meant that like they had zero immunities to any of like the big damage types. But it also meant that like no one had a good resistance or immunity to theirs, because again their damage type was very uncommon. So it meant that like very little people had any way of stopping this attack hurting them. which was just a good bit of fun. Which is also the reason as to why, thanks to Crollo, we ended up with liquid energy instead of dark fire. I would say unique attributes and homebrews alone can completely change not just a few things, not just everything, but also they can completely change the way that you look at a game and look at a system. Because people have made like Darth Vader as accurate as possible in D&D. People have made like the aliens, like the xenomorphs from Alien in D&D, like as actual creatures and monsters. One of the coolest bits of homebrew, and I genuinely recommend people check these out, is looking up homebrew weapons and items by stuff like The Deck of Many Things and other Patreon-based places. I think I actually have a list of a couple of them that I'd probably give a shout out to somewhere.
I remember the Griffin's saddlebag being a pretty frequent one.
Yes, the Griffin's saddlebag, that's a really good one. There's also Rudok's Tavern. That's a really good place. Rudok's Tavern, they also have a Patreon and I think an Instagram of all the different homebrew items that they make. Yeah, so there's Rudok's Tavern. I swear there's another one. I've actually got the list here. Load. Another really good one is also like when people do Sword Toba for like art and stuff. Like that is always fascinating to me. TheQuestMachine.com, they do ones. Loot Tavern, that's it. Loot Tavern is another one. That's another really lovely one. Daily Dungeoneer, and I'll just do one more, which is who will be the lucky one that gets chosen. I can't even find another one now. So yeah, that's Redux Tavern, Loot Tavern, and Daily Dungeoneer. I can't actually find another separate one at the moment, which is a shame because they're all the same at this point. Ink and Liar, I think, is another one, just off the top of my head at this point. But yeah, there's all sorts of really cool ones. So I recommend looking on, like, I guess you can sometimes look on stuff like Pinterest. You can look on Google Images or just search it up on any kind of browser or something, just to try and find it. But like homebrew items and objects in D&D and other tabletop RPG games, like having that possibility of seeing what other people create, like there are some really cool things. Like there's one item called the Crown of the Beholder, and it's literally just a beholder or a beholder set of abilities that a player can have on their head. And each eye has a different effect that you can gain access to and stuff. It's really cool. Like there's all sorts of really wacky things that you can do. Which actually kind of made us obsessed with a lot of other different items that we created for ours. But to be fair, at that point it's less homebrew and just more things that like we are building for the game. But unique attributes are the best way to sort of make homebrew on the fly. But most of the trade systems that we have, where you can build your own perks and abilities for trades and proficiencies, like I'm gonna be a medic, oh I'm gonna be a swordsman, or I'm gonna be a gunsmith or a blacksmith, or I'm gonna be just a getaway driver, or I'm gonna be a mechanic, or I'm gonna be a survivalist like Bear Grylls or something like that, or I'm gonna be a potions master or a botanist or something. Any of those different types of trades or proficiencies, you can make your own perks, and you can legitimately make up your own perks, and as long as they make sense with the realm of the possibility of the things, and they make sense and work based on they work and make sense based on the the actual ability system that we have, because we actually have guidelines as to how to make abilities and stuff. You can pretty much make your own perks, and that is a solid piece of homebrew there, where you could like practically make your own special effects, pretty much. Obviously, as you were talking about with Bartholomew, you basically got to do that. You had the ability to make advantage, make people have disadvantage, deal damage, make people fall asleep. I think at one point you could make people go into a conga line if they failed a wisdom check or something.
Yeah, it was literally called conga line. which is everyone who fails to save, obviously, I think barring allies, uh, gets into a conga line and goes in a direction of your choosing. I think it ends if they're either attacked or they succeed the save.
Okay.
I can probably pull it up. Where's Bartholomew sheet? It's been a hot minute.
But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of really cool things. I mean, I'm trying to think of. Are there any sort of homebrews that have really stood out to you, Kane, that you would say that weren't your own?
Excluding Bone Man. I honestly can't think, to be fair. I'm trying to remember previous campaigns and people's unique attributes, but I honestly can't think of any.
Problem is, I think most of the time, whenever we've had unique attributes, you have not been in those campaigns, or you've been the one with unique attributes.
Yeah.
I think the ones that you've seen are Lilith, Vale. Trying to think of any of the other ones now. I guess I guess you could Sun Uratef. That Bill played in the 24-hour campaign, like, because a lot of the stuff that he did was very homebrewish.
Yeah, although that was just more
systematic rather than actual homebrew. Yeah,
but there was nothing. He was technically just using the power as it is, rather than
enough.
Anything like that. Yeah, I mean, obviously, the last one was interesting, where it's basically just effigy animation, which is being able to create like sort of dolls and stuff and bring them to life. Except when she does it, she sacrifices hit points, but they become living creatures essentially under her control.
Yeah, they basically turn from like a basic statue into like a living creature, like an actual monster or demon or something.
Yeah, I mean that one's pretty fun. Honestly, I can't think of any. Like, I feel like I'm not in the campaigns where other people have them or that.
I think you might be right. A lot of the unique attribute characters often come at the point where like you're not usually the one playing as them. Because I was trying to think of anyone who actually had a unique attribute, and I genuinely, I'm actually, Abda Yamiya, Bill's character from the war campaign that we did.
I don't even remember what that
chemistry manipulation. His ability, his unique attribute was, instead of being able to like control and generate and manipulate and transmute things.
He only turned things into weapons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They could only be in the format of an actual weapon, so and they can only be melee weapons or shields.
Yeah.
But once he's transmuted them, he was able to manipulate them, and at one point he was able to like make a bundle of little mini shields and then start changing and shaping it into armor for someone to wear.
And it was also our ride across the desert for quite a while.
Yeah, you made a giant shield, and then I think you've like put up a sail or something like that. And
well, yeah, and we also used our powers to basically
propel you. Yeah,
because I used spatial with Link Portal, and then I think Alex with the explosion emission power used that to push us along.
I remember that. That was really, really weird. Just so, what are we going to do? So we're going to surf on a giant shield, about the size of like pretty much the width of 2 to 3 cars, and then someone's going to push us using the force of explosions. But also, to increase our speed, we're going to make portals that send us about 40 meters forwards each time.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
I guess there is also not a player character by any means, but the character we made, who was originally going to be a foil to Bartholomew in a sense, but the party's yet to meet him, so I don't know how much we can talk about him.
That is true, although arguably there are a few things that I would love to talk about with this character, but I don't know how many people from the party would potentially watch this episode, because I know that often Sam and Connor would listen to it. So obviously, if we talk about it, they'd know. So I'll just keep it a mystery for now. But at some point, we'll have to talk about it because I think personally, to me, it's very fascinating, very interesting about that type of character.
Also, just how we came up with it.
It is very silly, yes. Like it's so silly the way that we came up with that. I think that's also quite interesting to have those kind of weird things because I mean, one character that I made ages ago called Candy King Carlos, and his ability, it was a unique attribute again on chemistry, where he could just turn things into sweets, treats, and candy. So he could turn things into like chocolate, into hard candy, into sugary treats and bubblegum and stuff like that. At one point, he could like turn the entire turn an entire like vat of water into just fluffy candy floss. I love that kind of weird stuff. It's just so funny.
Yeah.
I'd say as a DM and as a narrator, you can get away with a lot more homebrew. I mean, I do it quite a bit. I don't think I've thrown any actual homebrew characters at you for a while. And what I mean by that, I mean as in like their powers aren't based, their powers aren't exactly identical to things that could be done. Because I mean, like even with the most recent characters that they fought, Kozuki Seryu, Jonathan Seryu, when you guys fought Suzaku, when they fought Rudder, and when you also fought Aliator and also Simakael, every single one of those had powers based off of the power compendium. None of them had homebrew abilities. You could argue one potential homebrew effect, but it was more just like a special ability where...
Technically, even if you go back near the beginning, they haven't actually... Only after the tournament, like properly after, and everyone met back up again, they pretty much hadn't fought anyone with homebrew-like abilities. Because technically everyone has had abilities that you could just do already.
Yeah.
Because the one that Sam fought with his sister, the pyrokinetic who could also manipulate smoke.
Yes.
That was technically the last one that a person has fought in a group who had a unique attribute of their powers.
Yes, because instead of just being able to generate fire, he could only generate smoke, and then he'd need to use another action to detonate the smoke, yes.
And the one before that was Llamageddon.
Llamageddon, did he have... Oh, yes, he did have a unique attribute. His, instead of him having...
His explosions had to come through... Well, he had two, technically. Because he can now turn into a llama.
Instead of... What, was it a rhino?
I believe it, instead of a rhino. And his explosions had to come through his feet instead of his hands. So I think the llama also like increased his move speed by like 3 times.
That's so funny.
So it's just a super fast llama who, whenever he runs, sets the floor to explode.
I mean, arguably you can say almost any anthropial type is homebrew if it's not on the original list. Obviously that's too easy, but I don't think you guys have actually faced off against any anthropials in a long time.
That's because it's a very small list at the moment.
It is a very small list, and to be honest, that means I have to work overtime to actually build a whole new, anthropial.
Very simple.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there was Monkey, but he was pretty basic.
Yeah. I think my favourite one that I've done is, weirdly enough, there's... I think Aquila. I can't believe that we didn't talk about Aquila.
Oh yeah, but that one's very basic.
It is very basic, but it's still very interesting. So Aquila obviously being like a phoenix, but instead of fire, it was lightning. But the 2 reasons why this is interesting is because you had a weakness where water wouldn't weaken you, but if you were placed into water that was like multiple times the size of your own body mass, you would then disperse through the entirety of that, liquid. Also,
Yeah.
rubber could physically hurt you, or if you were encased in too much of it, your powers wouldn't work, or at least your lightning generation wouldn't work. But you also had another special effect, which was passing through metal, legitimately going through any conductive objects and passing through it as easily as you wished. That was very cool.
Yeah, obviously it was only used for a short amount of time, but that was fairly interesting.
I feel like one homebrew that we do have to talk about, though, which is actually one of the reasons why I really wanted the unique attribute system in the first place, is that the unique attribute system that we've built is that for every good thing that you are given, something has to be taken of equal of equal standing. So if you're given something new has to be taken. If you're given a new resistance, maybe a new weakness has to come from it. If you're now given a new ability or a new effect, some kind of thing now has to make your power a little bit more difficult in another location, environment, or due to a certain type of damage, or due to a certain type of specific element to be around. It really depends. But obviously, for every ability point that you use, for every new effect that you're granting to yourself, something new bad or a new drawback has to be created to equalize them out. One very specific one that always reminds me of this is two things. Is first of all, from My Hero Academia, is Tomura Shigaraki with his ability where he can touch anything and it can disintegrate. But later on, you find out that if he does go all out with his disintegration, over a time, it can actually start drying up his body and even recoiling on him and actually damaging his body. At one point, it actually damages one of his legs and breaks it apart. So he actually has to be in rehabilitation for a while. So again, just having a really high-powered ability, also having that as for every damage scale that you go up, it can multiply the damage, but for every time that the damage goes up, you now take recoil, and the recoil gets higher and higher and higher. And so that that to me is very interesting. But the other one is actually, funny enough, comes from Critical Role, which is, I think if you have ever seen Critical Role, I think you already know where I'm going with this, which is Percival de Rolo III from Vox Machina.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I know the character. I watched the show. I didn't watch the actual show Critical Role, but I have watched the animated series. I know the character.
That's the same for both of you, isn't it?
No. I've been listening to the first one. I know. I bring this up because I know that back when Percival first became a thing, there was no such thing as a gunslinger class. And there was no such thing as guns in D&D.
Oh yes, no, it was an entirely class made with Matt. Yeah.
Yeah, it was entirely homebrew. They had to come up with downsides, and they had to come up with
Which is ironic because I think that's been all three of Talison's characters in each campaign.
No, don't tell me that he's a homebrewer in every single campaign.
He's a homebrewer in the second one, and I believe he's a homebrewer in the third one as well.
Damn. Taliesin.
Although I don't know if that class in the third one is out in their book. I could be wrong because I don't know, but I know he's a interesting form of barbarian in the third one.
Interesting.
So, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, having guns in a setting where people don't often know what guns or what guns are or how guns work, that's very interesting. Using that, I mean, being someone who can wield weapons that, in a world where these weapons don't normally exist, being basically the first types of creators of these types of weapons also is very interesting. I mean, to have that is so cool. I mean, the closest thing that we actually got to something like that is when you were playing as an Archer, you actually ended up playing with a weapon that was a magically imbued solar-powered special sword that was made out of like special type of silver enchanted with heliomancy that allowed you to basically deal like holy fire or holy solar damage. Whereas like, if it's undead, it takes more damage, and it does fire/energy crossbreed.
Yeah, I also got those gauntlets. There was also the Blade of Shadows. I didn't get that one, but
No.
but yeah, that one had quite a few unique items in it. I'm trying to think. I know there were others as well. I also got wacky time powers for a bit in that one.
Yes, yeah, unique attribute at one point where you
Which
were literally...
lasted for a session, so I immediately got rid of it. That was the filler episode that we had.
That was such a filler episode, because nothing really happened except from one character got killed.
Yeah.
As an NPC was murdered. Oh dear.
Well, I could basically rewind, I think it was, the scenario.
You had the Groundhog Day ability, where you could set nodes. Okay, this point in the day, and now this point in the day, and it just rewinds back to that point in the day, and then you just kept doing it for a while, and then you were like, I don't think this is a very useful power, or at the very least, it's like, this is not worth the sacrifice I have to make.
It's not even that. It was just like it was kind of too broken. It was just like, consequences. What are those?
So yeah, that wasn't great. Although, thanks to you making a homebrew character, aka Dio Brando with the world from thinking, time manipulation was allowed to be a thing because Juice, just for a thing. Back when the game was first becoming a thing, back when Animite Tales, we were starting out to creating it, we got to a certain point where we're like, yeah, time manipulation will never be a thing. Fast forward to now, that is a very funny joke, considering that we have an entire power called Time Child or Chronokin, where you can stop time, reverse aspects of time, see into the future, and even skip to forward events within anywhere up to 10 minutes. So we did a one shot, and you, I think, Kane, you decided that you wanted to play as Dio Brando.
Yes, I don't know why, but that was my choice. We had Link.
Yes.
From Zelda. We had I've forgotten his name, but from Sekiro.
Ishin Ashura.
That's it. Yeah, and then Dio Brando. Interesting combination, people.
Yes, it was. I basically said, hey, you can make any characters from fiction into this game, and we'll just go for it. And Des, definitely check out Des's content. I cannot remember it off the top of my head, but check out Des on
look it up.
Twitter. I'm now looking it up. But yeah, Des decided to play as a character known as Nemco. There we go. It's Nemco. If you look up Nemco, you should be able to find it. If not, Nemreeks on Twitch or YouTube. I think it's Twitch. Yeah, she played as oh my gosh, she played as Link. She played as Link. Bill played as Ishin Ashura, or Ishin Ashina, sorry, and then you played as Dio Brando, and we were like, okay, fine, this is only going to be a one-time thing. The way that we'll do it is that you roll to activate the power. You can only move within your allotted move speed. So if your move speed is 20 meters, you can only go up to 20 meters away. As soon as you walk 1 meter out of your move speed's allowance, time resumes, and that's it. Whilst time is stopped, no one else can react against you, and you can only perform one action whilst time is stopped, including an attack, which again, they can't react against you. So that was such a ridiculous ability. And then at the end, we were like, oh man, that was so cool. So,
after I turned a horse into a stand user.
That was weird. That was
also then got eternally burned by the sun forevermore.
I forgot about that. We made some very, very weird choices for those campaigns. But nevertheless, that then created an entire possibility. Again, just exactly like Bartholomew's entire race, that was a moment where we realised, hey, we could actually make this a thing as long as we know where the base is going to be. If this is the worst it's going to be, like time stopping is going to be the most overpowered facet of this power, theoretically it couldn't be that bad. Now,
it's not.
Time Child is a lot more OP than that, but they're still nowhere near that OP compared to what time manipulation can be, especially in a lot of shows. But yeah, time stopping is their main ability. They can see the past of any object or person that they're touching, and a couple of other few bits and bobs, such as like higher super dexterity, and a few other bits and pieces, ranging from anywhere as something as silly as just being able to move around when someone else is stopping time, all the way up to something as amazing as being able to like legitimately reverse someone up to like 4 hours ago, and even like make a thing paradoxed out of existence, but more of a consequence to an action rather than a person per se. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it was interesting, but when you're obviously when you're building a campaign, that can often happen where like, oh yeah, this homebrew works really well, I like that, yeah, that's fine. But when we're building this game at the moment, homebrew is basically the way that we create new abilities. we basically spent an hour just saying exactly that. When creating a game, homebrew is usually the very first thing that branches off from the creation of an entire new mechanic.
Yeah.
I think that's it, unless if anyone else has anything else to say.
Nothing that comes to mind.
No? Kane, yourself?
Yeah, I think we're all blanks there.
Fair enough. It is pretty late here. I think it's like just gone 11 at night for us. So
yeah, it has for you two. Me sitting over here in America.
Well, good for you with your whole 6 extra hours of daytime.
Look, I woke up at like 1 p.m. This is my morning.
I don't know if that's anything to brag about, but I'll take that as a brag.
I think it's more just a fact.
It is
a
more
brag.
of a fact.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, thank you, Juice, for joining us, and thank you yet again, Kane, for joining me on this episode. Anyone who is willing to listen or willing to watch any of our episodes, we do tabletop RPG games of the game Animite Tales, which at some point the website will be open for you to be able to play, as we are constantly going to be running the beta throughout a large majority of this game's life, so you can play it, test it, see what you think about it, and obviously give us feedback on it as we continue to keep it going. Thank you very much for listening, and have a wonderful night.
Woo.
Yeah.
Wow, you guys are energetic. And as always, ciao ciao for now.